One of the things that we usually hear that first-time visitors are expecting is that they're expecting to see a swamp in the Everglades. That's a real popular term used to describe where you're at. And with the idea that you're visiting a swamp, you have an expectation of what this place is supposed to look like. And when you look out to the distance, the water may start to resemble, or looks like it resembles, what you expected. It looks like it might be dark water, muddy water, murky water, and that sort of thing are ways that people usually describe the Everglades before they got here or for their first time. It's like, yeah, this is a swamp, and the water's going to look a certain way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get down into the water out here. I'm going to collect some. Looks pretty good. So, if you can and you want to be honest, how many expected the water to be like this in the Everglades? Yeah. See a lot of folks kind of nodding their head, no way, right? And that's good. That means we're learning something. That means I'm teaching you something. So what gives? What trick am I playing on you? Or what trick has everyone ever played on you? The fact that, wait, we're entering a swamp. What's going on here, right? You're drinking water, your Everglades water, okay? Not what you expected. So the Everglades does not behave like a swamp. It's not shaped or created like a swamp. It behaves more like a river, okay? If it was a swamp, it's a swimming pool. It's a big deep pool where the water would get stuck and not move anywhere. That's not the case. The Everglades behaves more like a river because we have seasonal rainfall. All right, the summer months we're entering is when the majority of the rain comes, 60 inches of rain over a 6-month period, from about May to October. All right, give or take a week here. You get every single afternoon somewhere in South Florida, you can anticipate there's going to be rainfall. That rainfall fills the Everglades with the fresh water it needs to be healthy. And then once it falls, it's not stuck, it flows. From where you're looking at, the water would flow from left to right, north to south. Not a very fast flow, even though we've described this place to behave more like a river. The river flows very slow. Some say about 100 feet a day. Okay, very slow. But because it's moving, it's constantly filtering through the sawgrass prairies and these freshwater prairies, so the water is always kind of clear. The Everglades is not a swamp. Okay, it doesn't behave like a swamp. And if you were going to try to describe this area in a different way, you would want to describe it more like a river. And you may have heard the term river of grass. That's much more accurate as the water flows through these grasslands out there. What do you see?
Oh, alligator. Oh, there we go, right there.
There's one.
Glad he waited for me. Stop. Fantastic.
I got something here that would lure him too.
What you got there?
This, my friend, is my homemade alligator call.
Uh-oh.
It mimics the sound of a hatchling in distress.
Oh.
And so therefore, if it works, with your permission, I can test it out to see if you would come towards us to investigate the sound.
So not to be a curmudgeon and not to be the bearer of bad news, but we do not promote or allow that sort of thing because we have in the past, and it creates really, really dangerous situations.
Correct.
And not just for alligators, but we've had people call owls to get them to come out, and they will, and then they attack.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate the enthusiasm, but I please request we not do that, because this is as good as it's going to get in a natural setting. We didn't ask this guy to come out. He chose to come out. So it's a huge treat for us right now.
Ranger Rudy did a good talk. We saw swallowtail kites at the end, too far away to try to get on the video camera. Quite a few alligators, a couple of great blue herons, a lot of fish. It was nice. I waited 20 minutes for that great blue heron to take flight, and I gave up, and as soon as I walked away, he took off. That's hilarious.
I think all of us at some point in time have heard a story about alligators, whether you've been here before or not. And most of us that have not been here tend to have heard the most stories about alligators and the threat they may pose. And you're entering Everglades National Park. If I told you a few weeks ago that you were going to be in the Everglades and you were going to see 4 or 5 gators and one was going to be 5 feet away from you, you may have been a little bit worried, right? And you may have been worried because of some of the stories you've heard. A lot of these stories may be accurate. A lot of these stories tend to stretch the truth a little bit. Some of the stuff that I was raised with as a local is you got to be careful with alligators because they can chase you. And what are you supposed to do if and when an alligator does chase you? Do you know?
Run faster.
Run faster?
Climb a tree.
What's that?
You can't run faster, so.
Yeah, so you heard the story about zigzag, right? You heard about this idea, you run in zigzag and they can't get you and that sort of thing. And there's numbers that float around about how fast an alligator may be, and those numbers get tossed around, essentially to promote this kind of fear in you, uneasiness in you about alligators. And today we were out in the Everglades and we saw alligators, and you saw their behavior. And a lot of these stories are exaggerated and not entirely accurate. It does not mean that an alligator is not dangerous or can't be dangerous. They certainly can be. They have the tools to be, but the way I would want to phrase it is, why would they? All right, in a natural setting. An alligator is afraid of you for the same reasons that most of us are of them, and it's the size. We're not typically afraid of a small lizard, unless you have a phobia of a small lizard, but they don't usually agitate us to that point. But an alligator does, and it's because of that size. Well, an alligator isn't the brightest animal. They have the brain the size of a walnut, so they do what they do really well, but they're not necessarily problem solving to that extent, so that when they see a big animal like us, we also trigger a fear in them. And that's one thing a lot of folks don't anticipate. But I don't necessarily want to talk about the fear aspect of it. The one thing I want to highlight is I'm not necessarily wanting to concentrate on the scary stuff. What's the good news? What's the point of this alligator? All right, let's share a good story that most of us haven't talked about or heard about. We talked about the wet and dry season and how that influences the Everglades. I introduced the idea of a dry season and a very extreme time of the year. And if you start to kind of think about it a bit, you start to wonder, well, if the Everglades goes dry, or potentially dry with few exceptions, well, what happens to everything that makes this home year-round? Okay, because there is migrations of birds that come and go, but there are wildlife, there are animals and species that call this area home year-round. Gators, fish, turtles, frogs, some bird life, etc.
There's a big turtle. Oh. What's he up to?
If you do by chance end up seeing one that's coming towards you and it feels like he's actually like coming towards you, grab your paddle and you splat, like hit the water as hard as you can. Don't hit the croc, but hit the water as hard as you can to give off like the thump in the water, and that'll more than likely, you know, keep them away if they're trying to come around. But it's very unlikely any of them are going to approach you. They're not like that. American crocodiles, man, you know, they're only looking for basically some small stuff. They're not going to go out here, you know, they don't ever mess with the manatees or anything. They're not not trying to eat anything that's as big as them, you know. Again, I mean, if your kayak tips over anything, don't freak out. You know, don't be just splashing in the water because that will make them think they're just a distressed animal or something. That would draw them in. So, yeah, like, again, they're not going to bother you. Really, these guys, like, man, they're just looking for some birds or small fish, and, you know, whatever will fall in the water.
There's where that crocodile was a second ago.
Have a good one.
I really like the design of this old visitor center. It's currently closed, probably doing some refurbishment, remodeling. Big temperature drop when you're in the shade because it is hot outside. Oh, this hanging moss is cool. Oh, I'm on the Guy Bradley Trail. Get to walk past the construction site where they're building new accommodations. So those are containers. Interesting. I'm going to cut this trip short from getting eaten alive. I've been sprayed with deep woods off. There's an American ibis. And you get one of those nets that you put over your head. I sprayed deep woods off on, which I don't like using that stuff, but you're a place like here, you have no choice. However, it's not working. Might be working a little bit on the mosquitoes, but it's not working on the flies. And those things were swarming all over me. Definitely need the screen thing that goes over your head. It's thick in here. It gives them definitely good habitat to hide out in. Good morning. I'm on my way to Key West today. I'm leaving the Everglades Flamingo Campground, and clearly off season. because there are so many empty sites. So if you come here, you definitely need a boat. There's not a lot to do. There's not many hiking trails or things to explore, but there were manatees in the harbor as well as crocodile. So the marina is the place to hang out, I guess.